What is up, my fine friends? It is time for the top 5 new brews or murders at Karlov Manor. We are on number 4, and you don't want to miss this deck. Alrighty, then let's get into it. So this is Blue-White Detectives. It's the number 4 on our top 5 new brews. And let's break it down for you. We've got 8 1-drops here. Sorry, 10 1-drops here. I can count. 4 of them are Mistway Spy, a new 1-drop creature that's a blue for a 1/1 flying creature. It also has the Disguise ability, so you can play it face down as a 2/2 with Ward 2, then later flip it up. And when you flip it face up, then whenever a creature deals combat damage to a player, you investigate. So, early game, you're usually just going to play it as a 1 mana, 1/1 flying. But let's say you've got 3 or 4 creatures on the battlefield. You're a little bit worried the opponent's going to wrath you. So you can play this down, flip it up, swing in. Now you get 3 or 4 clue tokens, which you can turn into cards later. So it's kind of like insurance in the late game to give you some value, even if you get board wiped. So that one's pretty decent. And even though it's a 1 mana for a 1/1 flyer, you're going to see later that we have ways to kind of buff up our creatures. So it's not going to matter too much. Secondly, we have Novice Inspector. This is basically a reprint of Thraben Inspector from the Innistrad set. That card was always quite good. It's still played in Historic and some other formats. So it's a good card. It's a 1 mana for a 1/2, enters the battlefield, and then you investigate, so you make a clue token. Same thing, even though it's just a 1/2, we're gonna have ways to pump it up. And then Skrelv Defector Might. This is just kind of a good 1-drop for most aggro decks in standard. Gives you some protection and evasiveness. So yeah, you kind of want to have that in most of your white aggro based decks. All right, 2 CMC. We have a lot of different interesting cards. Not all of which are creatures, but we'll start with the creatures. So we've got Perimeter Enforcer, 1 and a white for a 1/1 flying lifelink. Whenever another detective enters the battlefield under your control, or whenever one is turned face up, then this gets +1/+1 until end of turn. I know that line of text there kind of sucks, but even so, having a 2 mana 1/1 flying with lifelink that is going to get bigger in some instances is pretty good for what we want in this deck. So that's why we're still running that one. And then the other card we have is 10th District Hero, 1 and a white for a 2/3. It's just a human when it comes down, which is one of the downsides of this one. But if you pay 2 mana, it turns into a 4/4. Pay 2 mana and collect evidence 2, turns into a 4/4, and becomes a detective with vigilance. So it does become a detective pretty easily. And then if you somehow get to the last state where you pay 3 and you collect evidence 4, then it becomes a 5/5, and it makes your other creatures indestructible. So probably, since this is an aggro deck, there's not that much of a likelihood you're going to get to the last stage, unless maybe you're playing against control decks. So in the case where you do play against control decks, getting indestructible is pretty nice. Of course, Sunfall and Farewell get around that, so that's the kind of downside. And that's why we're running 2 of them, because it's just okay when it's played, but if you can pump into it, the 2 mana or the 3 minutes, that's when it starts to get better. And then at the 2 mana slot, we have some of the cards which I think make Detective a somewhat viable deck. First of which, Case of the Pilfered Proof. This is the new cards called Cases, which are enchantments that have some effect, and then when you reach some goal, kind of like a quest or something, once you've achieved the quest, then you get some payoff at the last stage of it. So when it comes down, it says whenever a detective enters the battlefield under your control, and whenever a detective is turned face up, put a +1/+1 counter on it. So essentially, it's kind of like a 2 mana anthem for detectives. Every detective you play is going to get a +1/+1, which is pretty nice. If you have 2 of these on the battlefield, then all your guys are going to come in as like 3/3s and 3/4s. And you could even say it's better than an Anthem because if an Anthem gets blown up, all your creatures shrink. But in this case, the counters are already on the creatures, so it doesn't matter. So yeah, that part by itself is really, really good. Then the second step, the mission that you're trying to achieve to solve the case, you have to get 3 or more detectives on the battlefield. Since this is a detective deck, you know, it's not that unlikely we're going to get 3 detectives on the battlefield. I would say it's very likely you're going to have 3 detectives on the battlefield at some point in the game. So that's not that hard to achieve. And then if you do that, then whenever 1 or more tokens would be created under your control, you get to also create an additional clue token. Yeah. So most of the tokens we're creating with this deck are clue tokens. So essentially it just means you get 2 clue tokens every time you make a clue token. Like Novice Inspector coming in, investigating, now it's going to make 2. Which is good. You know, I mean, it'll be matchup dependent, but it is good that you're going to have all these clues. So even if your creatures are dying or you're trading a little bit inefficiently, then mid to late game, you can start to sack some of those clues and recuperate your cards and take the lead that way. And you'll also see in just a second that we have some advantage to sacking our clues. So this card, Prof's Eidetic Memory, 1 in a blue, legendary enchantment. Whenever it enters the battlefield, you draw a card. You have no maximum hand size. And then at the beginning of combat on your turn, if you've drawn more than 1 card this turn, put X +1/+1 counters on the target creature you control, where X is the number of cards you've drawn this turn -1. So essentially, what it means is if you drew any cards except for the first card in your upkeep, then you're going to put +1/+1 counters on your creatures. Which is good because, you know, we're getting all these clue tokens. So anytime we can sack a clue token, we get to put a counter on a creature. And this also draws when it first comes in. So you're going to immediately get 1 +1/+1 counter just right off the bat. And in our 3 mana slot, we have this creature, the Steam Core Scholar. It says, let me zoom in. It's a lot of text, so it's a little bit small. Whenever Steam Core Scholar enters the battlefield, draw 2 cards, then discard 2 cards unless you discard an instant sorcery or creature with flying. This is going to trigger our Prof's Eidetic Memory and put 2 +1/+1 counters on our creatures. So this is a really sweet combo here. Just basically for free. So, you know, you could even play this in. You get the 2 counters. This becomes a Flying Vigilance 4/4 for 3 mana, essentially, which is very sweet. On top of that, if we have, you know, an instant we don't care about, which isn't that likely to happen, but a creature with flying we don't care about, we can discard that and we essentially draw an extra card. Like we drew 2, we discard 1. So you could even go net positive on that interaction there. Worst case, it's fixing. Best case, you get +1 card. And we have quite a few flying creatures. This-Way Spy, Perimeter Enforcer, and the Steam Core Scholar. And then, of course, maybe you're playing against control and you don't need the removal, then you can discard the removal. All right, the last 2 cards we didn't talk about yet. Alquist, Prof, Master Sluth. So you could even say this is a Prof deck because, you know, we've got Prof and his Eidetic Memory in here. But yeah, basically, it's just a decent card. 1 white and a blue for a 3/3 with Vigilance. Enters the battlefield, it investigates. So, you know, if you have this one solved, you're going to get 2 clue tokens off that. You can sack those clue tokens, trigger your Eidetic Memory. And then Prof also has this other ability where you get to Sphinx's Revelation, essentially. So if you ever do get to do that, even for 2 or 3 cards, you know, you're going to get card advantage, you're going to gain some life to help against aggro, and it's going to trigger your Eidetic Memory again, getting more counters. So it's really a very snowbally deck, right? So it may not be as fast as some of the other aggro decks, but as soon as you start getting your engines going, really gonna kind of snowball for you. And then the last card, Private Eye, another card that really makes the detectives archetype work. This is the Lord for the detectives, 1 blue and a white. Other detectives get +1/+1, and whenever you draw your second card each turn, then target detective can't be blocked. So it pumps all your guys. Decent body, 3/3, and because we have clues to draw, we have the Steam Core Scholar to draw, we have the Adectic Memory to draw, we have quite a few ways to draw, and those will all trigger his ability, making it so that you can get in with some unblockable damage. Helps when you're in those stalemates against other aggro decks, and you each have a board state, but no one can swing in because there'll be bad trades. Now you can get in unblocked and do some damage. So that is the detective deck. It's pretty sweet. The mana base is pretty solid as well. And you could even use some of the new surveil lands. I didn't do it because they come in tapped, but you could do it. We also get to play Cavern of Souls because we have a creature type detectives that all of our cards share, which really helps us out with using that mana. So yeah, pretty sweet, pretty solid looking archetype here from the new set. And I think it's one of the ones that has a lot of promise. Of course, we already have like 2 other blue-white aggro decks in the format, soldiers and humans, and I think there's even a blue-white tempo deck. There's a blue-white toxic deck, so lots of blue-white aggro decks. Here's another one. We've got another one, but at least this time you can feel cool doing it because you're a detective solving the case, and that's better than being just a soldier. So yeah. Anyway, that's gonna be it for this number 4. Hope you enjoyed it, and try it out when the new set comes out. Until next time, see ya.